Situación en Cintamani. Situación en el pulpo. El mes entrante supuestamente tenemos que salir de aquí. Obviamente eso nos pone en una gran dificultad, que es qué hacer con todas las pendejadas que tenemos. Tenemos un enorme montón de pendejadas para vender. Entonces creo que lo más sensato es hacer la gran venta del pulpo. Todo a la venta. ¿Cuánto por niño?
20 pesos.
Tú no querías que yo filmara toda la escena con tu mamá, ¿verdad?
Tonto.
¿Sabes por qué? Porque tenías miedo de los sentimientos siendo compartidos.
Turtle versus Apatosaurus.
Mira tus ojos. Mira tu respuesta. Estás evadiendo el tema.
Mira, tío, el apatosaurio.
En la cámara.
Eso es un apatosaurio.
No te culpo. ¿Es un patosaurio? Es una tortuga, güey.
Eso es una tortuga, pero mira.
Tienes que jugar Icewind Dale. De otra manera no sabes jugar nada. Entonces, tengo toda una oficina para vender. Deshacerme de muchas cosas. Remate. Eso es lo que hace falta aquí. Es un remate. Vamos a rematar todo.
History is secrecy. That is, it repeats itself because human beings, despite their education, technology, language differences, etc., are essentially the same. All people are identical, but the people organize into societies based upon essentially the same reasons. People have kind of the same goals at the end of the day. I've been all over the world, folks, and the average person wants kind of the same things no matter where you are. They just want to be left alone, and they want to be able to enjoy life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What a concept. And that's not just Americans. Those were the people I met, the beautiful people I met in Afghanistan, the people I met in Iraq.
Dino Destination, Dino Destination.
Folks, in America, we have fractionalized and segmented peoples here with wildly differing views, and some of them are willing to use the power of the federal government to alter our nation's laws so that they can have things their way. So convinced are they that they are right and their opponents are evil and wrong that they will do this. Beware, by the way, when a debate shifts from ideas being wrong or debatable to people being evil. When someone disagrees with your idea, they must offer a counterpoint to be logically debated. Painting your opponent out as evil is a cheap way, lazy way of saying you are too ignorant or lazy to debate, or that you are so arrogant as to believe you do not need to justify your position or support your ideas. You will simply rule by making a statement, and that's it. You will use the tyranny of the majority, and dissenting opinion can be damned, because, after all, it came from an evil person. It should be noted such a position is also chock full of arrogance. Beware when your opponent tries to shift the debate away from logic and reason and over to you being a villain or evil person for believing what you do. You are dealing then not with a rational person but an ideologue, and the time for debate has ended. The time to fight politically or otherwise is beginning. Gun control is a good example of this, but it's not the only example. As society grows, more people are becoming very meddlesome in the affairs of others and are demanding more. When I lived in a crowded city, making noise at 2 a.m. woke up lots of people. Now, such as last night when I wake up screaming at 2 a.m., nobody hears. And most people, more people, more benefits, more resources, and that all comes at the expense of other groups.
Nos toquemos un ratón, huevón. Hueva.
And it's going to get ugly. We'll talk about that another time. Oil and other resources also
sé cómo sacarte.
Eventually, you've got this exponential curve of use going up, this exponential curve of depletion going down to look at. So it creates a very scary curve. It looks like a roller coaster. Taxes versus benefits is another. We are spending more as a nation than we're taking in. On that note, before you swiftly throw the unemployed under the bus on this is the problem, do the math for me on this, and you see the welfare and entitlement programs to the upper 1% are certainly outstripping the joke.
¿Cómo atrapar un ratón?
Balkanization is a geopolitical term originally used to describe the process of fragmentation or division of a region or state into smaller regions that are often hostile or uncooperative with each other. Sound familiar?
There you are.
The Balkans have been notorious for this, and let's be frank, many of the nations and states in the world were not made by natural division, i.e. division
Tampilón.
on natural boundaries
Hola.
and voluntary associations. Whenever you see a straight border on a map,
Perdón, ya nada.
that is an indicator the only one. If the boundary is
Creo que
man-made,
ahí es el ángulo
there's
correcto.
probably going to be trouble at some point later on.
Una gran venta de
We stand on the brink
que nos mudamos. Es lo que hace falta.
of balkanization. Actually, we're already
Tener un poco de ingresos para el programa.
catastrophic
Lo que
balkanization.
significa que tenemos que ser...
The numbers of people who are willing to have their states secede is growing.
Tío,
And we drift further and
¿por qué
further.
eres tan feo?
There is no compromise with the gun control crowd, for instance.
¿Por qué usas
It's
falda?
victory or defeat when we're dealing with them. If they win a single battle,
No, pero mi pregunta es ¿por qué usas falda y grabas?
victory.
Con-
Interestingly, so do we.
Porque quiero que el mundo entienda que la falda es más cómoda para el hombre que los
We have
pantalones.
people who revere our Constitution
Quiero que el
and
mundo
those who
entienda que la
despise
barba
it, saying it's
no va a
outdated.
estar.
We have people who want to reinterpret
Quiero
it
que el mundo entienda
harshly
que
in
un
terms
ratón
of
hermano vale dos.
and all the way to people who want to interpret it
Quiero que el
in
mundo
visions
entienda cómo poner un
that
ratón.
strips away our unbelievable rights. Not all of them, just the ones that they don't seem to have much use for.
Pero nadie en el mundo está viendo esto porque la cámara está por allá.
Guaranteed God-given unalienable rights are under serious
Eso lo podemos
attack.
cambiar.
Just a second.
El ratón en la cabeza del niño.
Me está arañando.
Araña, araña, araña.
Fundamental rights by
Araña, araña, araña.
Ahora bésalo.
No, gracias. Bésalo tú.
or,
Yo siempre lo
as far
beso.
as I do, God-given.
Es mi rata besable.
Want to go to
Hola, rata besable.
imagine that.
Tu abuela lo llama el pene,
Because it allows
porque dice que tiene gran forma de pene.
people to do as they
Creo que es
please
notable.
with their fully members.
¿Dónde está el pinche estegosaurio?
No sé, ¿dónde está el pinche estegosaurio? Quiero que este ratón aprenda a andar en humano. Pero es muy... Es muy...
Minority, regardless of how slim the differences are between numbers of people. Their actions can, of course, be returned
Tío, ¿dónde está
and should be either way. No, we're not a democracy, thank God. We are a republic with democratic tendencies. We have constitutionally guaranteed rights and limits and boundaries on government power, and also what other people are allowed to do, and laws to protect us all from the tyranny of the majority. We have a growing population of immigrants, which should be a wonderful thing, but the method of immigration is being manipulated by elitists and businesses to ensure these immigrations become a disaffected source of cheap labor, kept poor and poorly educated for as long as possible. This is not a good way to assimilate a people and causes them to rightly retreat into their own communities. And can you blame them? We have a political system that has been hijacked and co-opted by special interests, ensuring our government is becoming less and less representative every day. We have widespread corruption within the same government. Corporations and businesses are now placing their own people into regulatory positions. This is a condition called regulatory capture. It's very akin to the revolving door. That is, somebody that works at Goldman Sachs goes to work in one of the regulatory things, regulatory commissions, that's supposed to monitor people like like SAC to Goldman Sachs, and then when they get done, they can write back to Goldman Sachs, indicating that there's a huge amount of time or some people what's wrong with justice departments. Monitoring. And that's happening openly. Nobody's even ashamed. In fact, they're actually acting like it's a good thing. Sorry, folks. That's like letting the inmates pick their own warden. This has given us a series of financial catastrophes and has now set up a condition of entrenched corruption that has brought us the nightmares, to name but one, of Wall Street, but not limited to just that. It has also given us corporate giants that pay virtually no taxes, and that's bad, but they also, when they're making money, but they also collect taxpayer money on top of this. In other words, many of us went to work last year so that Facebook could get a $460 million gift from us. I don't recall voting to give Facebook $460 million, nor should a company that made $1.2 billion profit last year be bailed out. It's bad enough bailing out the ones that gambled recklessly. Now we're bailing out the ones that make money. Wow, when does it end? Our money supply is controlled by a private entity that enriches an aristocracy. I speak of the Federal Reserve, which is not a federal institution, nor does it have any reserve. As we speak, the Federal Reserve is essentially robbing us all at a calculated rate of 2.5% per year, and plans to do so until they can raise it higher. Those who are engaged in all of this stuff are cleverly setting us at each other's throats to keep us distracted. Gay marriage, flag burning, and a host of other non-issues are blown out of proportion. Let me ask you, what is more important, preventing an economic collapse that could make us all into paupers, or worrying about what two people want to do with their lives or do behind closed doors, even living in sin? On that note, for the gay bashers who choose to use religion as the baseball bat, do you really believe your house is so in order that you can afford to spend your time worrying about the sins of others so vigorously? This is a rhetorical question for which we already know the answer. The worst sin, my friends, and this is kind as I can, are our own personal sins, for they are the ones that we will stand before God and give account for. God is not going to grade on the curve, nor is he going to allow you to obfuscate and point over at some other sinner to distract him from your case. Now, I hope I have painted the picture that we have all the conditions necessary for a civil war. They're all there, folks. It's all there, and then some. Indeed, we have a lot more reasons today than they had in the first Civil War. They're all there on the table. I mean, it is right there. The trigger just needs to be tripped, and we're in it. We're in the mix. Now for the kicker, though. There will be no Civil War. How can you say that? You just explained to us all of this stuff, Nate Prepper. I know I did. I'm going to explain to you the other side of this equation now, why there won't be one. And it's not going to be pretty. Okay? It's not because we're all going to learn to sing Kumbaya together, nor is it to be bland and feckless and say, well, there's no problem. Y'all are just imagining it. Of course not. Those of you that see these things as I do, we're seeing things clearly, I believe. No, it's not the reason at all. It's because the government will not allow it. You remember status quo, Abraham Lincoln, Civil War, to keep these from seceding. Okay, let's talk now. The government, you see, is not controlled by our elected representatives. That's the first fairy tale we need to put in the trash. It is controlled by special interests who own them. They make these huge campaign contributions and other donations, and they have all of these special interest groups. There are 16,000 lobbyists, I believe, up in Washington, D.C., manipulating probably
16,000 lobbyists, boy.
Elected officials, embarrassing their numbers, and lobbying about $3 billion plus a year that we know of into the pockets of our elected officials and representatives, and as well as regulatory commissions and appointed positions. These special interest groups might be selfish, but they're also cautious. A civil war would cause tremendous economic losses to begin with, and that alone gives them a good reason to ensure that the politicians they bought off, fair and square, act on their behalf to stop it before it gets started. The government has wicked good intelligence gathering tools to begin with, thanks to the Patriot Act, NDA, and other abominations. Did you ever wonder why the tech giants like Microsoft, Facebook, etc. are all so eager to cough up our personal data? That's yours and mine, not theirs. That is because they know it helps them in numerous ways. For one, these people expect the government to pay them back with favorable trade agreements, and of course to be given more tax money. As I mentioned earlier, Facebook, $1.2 billion in profits, $0 in taxes, and $460 million of taxpayer money. So I guess that would make their profits at $1.6 billion, right? Okay, but I digress. More to the point, they know they're working to preserve their own interests in doing this, and giving up our personal information is a very inexpensive way to do this. I, for one, am in favor of keeping status quo, by the way. I don't want to be civil war. Some people say, well, we need one civil war. Take back our country and all this. Well, folks, opportunizing on a disaster is always a very bad thing to do, because usually people are willing to opportunize that way, are willing to opportunize other things. And the last thing I'm going to sit behind stand for is somebody that shows up with a new deal during a crisis. Okay, I'm pretty much in favor of the best way to get your wrecked car back on the road is to fix it, not go out and try to invent the wheel, or reinvent the wheel. This method of control, though, I for one am very in favor, by the way, of keeping status quo, as I said, but I believe there are other ways of doing it besides with force. This method of control ignores the real problems we have and is essentially going to resort to force to keep status quo, much the way Lincoln resorted to force and war to preserve the Union. I'm going to keep this Union alive by attacking the southern states and destroying them. Okay, wow. There were and are other ways to end slavery. And by the way, slavery is still a huge problem in the world today. But because of the hyper-focus that Hollywood has made on the issue, you'd think the only people ever enslaved were black people in this country. And that's not accurate. There are people today that are still enslaved. Human trafficking is a huge problem. And I'm going to be talking about that in the future, because that's something I think we need to address. There were and are other ways to end slavery and other negative institutions, and they essentially involve this. You got to come up with a deal in which all parties get something good out of the renegotiated contract. Okay? Offering up a one-sided deal, arrogantly proclaiming you're evil, I'm good, take it or leave it, is a certain way to have a fight. Okay? If that's what you want, that's what you'll get. You'll get a fight. You make all the sacrifices, and I'm going to sit back here and crow about what a wonderful person I am for coming up with this great plan, which makes you do all the paying and sacrificing, and I'm just going to sit back here and fold my arms up and tell everybody that, yes, I came up with a great idea. Okay, you're the football bat in the room when you start doing that. You're less than useless. Folks, there is little going on that government doesn't know about. Thus, we are not going to see the government surprised by something like an attack on Fort Sumter, which was the opening round of our first Civil War. We aren't going to see our political parties within states gaining a true foothold on the issue of secession. Oh, for sure, you'll get a bunch of signatures on a petition and make some bold statements on the subject, but at the end of the day, you're still going to be with us, you're still going to be in the United States, you're still going to be part of the Union of States, if you will. And because if you get too successful, they're going to bring in the tools on you, okay? Now, what do I mean by the tools? Well, the government has a lot of tools for shutting down dissent and shutting down movements and shutting down things, which status quo. If the party gets a little too close to the top, the two transformers that are in power, they want to make sure that you don't remember the tools. One of the tools, of course, is the tools, and there are many of them. One of the reasons the tools are so successful is also our fault, because there's a paucity of knowledge and information. Or worse, the information we get, we don't know how to vet it. We don't know how to read something and say, wow, is that accurate, or is that just some speculation? And I'll go to websites that purvey in the sensation about conspiracies, and they play connected on. They just throw out a series of unrelated events and try to darkly hint that somehow they're all connected. And that's pretty fun, but when you get people confused, well, that's not good, because it makes them ineffective. When issues get too volatile, forces are engaged to defuse the situation. The gun control issue was an attempt to see if they could fast forward a victory on us. And when they didn't, they could disarm us, by the way. They have the opportunity to say, well, they're less likely to be secession or breakaways. It's going to be easier to control and manipulate people if they're disarmed. Okay? The aristocracy, by the way, has no interest in seeing you in a prison camp. Okay? The reason for disarmament is so they can round you up, put you in a FEMA camp, convert you to Islam before killing you. Put you in a cattle car, haul you off to a FEMA camp. Folks, let's talk for a second. The aristocracy has no interest in seeing you in prison. It's not open evidence, okay? That's so they don't need a FEMA camp to do that. FEMA, the people that talk about FEMA don't understand what FEMA is and what their role is. That's one thing. FEMA is not village. It is a placebo being offered up to millions of Americans who don't want to take responsibility for their own selves during disasters and crises, and want the myth that some magic fairy government agency is going to come floating out of the clouds with millions of men in black suits carrying generators in black briefcases and holding your hand and rubbing your belly to get you through the disaster. Ask the people that went through Hurricane Sandy how much FEMA was there. Now, the only way FEMA works additionally is if they can concentrate all the resources on a small affected area. You get a nationwide WROL without rule of law condition, and you'll see FEMA doesn't have enough people to do much more than hold up a sign saying, sorry, as you march by as a refugee off into the countryside, to starve to death. Okay. But that being said, FEMA has other purposes. But prison camps aren't their forte. Now consider how many prisons, though, that we do have already, and how easy it is to get more of them. And you're going to see how easy it is to go surgically into a group of people that are troubled, scoop up their leaders and throw them into one of these already existing prison camps where you got guards, you got all the mechanisms to hold you in perpetuity, limbo, to keep you locked down. And they have federal and state as well as county programs. An actual concentration camp is already more expensive to set up with security. And it's just not something FEMA set up to do. For one thing, they don't have the personnel. And then you get to know people that say, well, the military will do it. And then again, know your misunderstanding. Yes, there are some scumbags in the military. We saw some of them in Katrina. And by the way, I've never met any of them. But I know there were some that engaged in gun grabbing. And they realized that kept the mission on the ground because you get around everyone soldiers. They find out actions and still are. They can take some tools on them. It's just too easy to digress. On that note, FEMA camps. Again, I would be more concerned about DHS than I would about FEMA. I don't trust DHS. I look at them suspiciously, but that's because they've amalgamated all of these organizations into one. That doesn't mean I don't like people working for DHS. I met some really nice guys from Customs every day. Real friendly guys, really nice chat about their body armor, and they're telling me about their weapons and stuff. You know, I've done some stuff with Customs, Border Patrol years ago, and we were talking about that, and them on the southern border, drug stuff. So anyway, it was just kind of a nice chat, and they're not down with any of that taking patriots away and locking them up stuff. They wouldn't be joining hands in that. Okay, that's not You're vilifying people when you do that. And there are people that are villains, but they're not that much worse. Okay. Remember at the end of the day that you have value to the government, and it isn't as a fellow human being, the dignity of man and all that, the brotherhood of man. It's your ability to pay taxes and also to stimulate the economy. They want to keep status quo. That is, they need to keep status quo. Status quo is you and I going to work, producing something of value, so we get paid, so they can tax that. Then we turn around and we take the money we earn, and we spend it into the economy, and our labor helps with that. Okay, we create something, and money we spend it, and that creates jobs. Each dollar you spend reverberates like a little stone into a pond. Causes other dollars to be spent and allows them to print more money, and made all of this allows us to maintain status quo. Civil War, with putting people in prison camps, rounding up patriots and sending them to FEMA death camps inside of converted automobile hauling rail cars. It's not part of the plan. Think of the Matrix if you need. They need you to be a low copper top battery and keep producing so they can keep status quo. All this being said, these same people who are working so hard to keep a lid on us, to keep status quo, to manage the situation as it were, have some fatal flaws. Let's talk about them. One is that the fact that they are also incessantly greedy for wealth or power or both. Greed and lust for power are diseases. And once someone is infected, there are a few cures. Their greed is what I predict will crash the world economy, much as it nearly did back in 2008. On that note, the perpetrators of all that fraud and crime still have yet to be prosecuted. And little wonder, they have their own people working as regulators. They have their own inmates that we wouldn't elect to be the warden. Further, the chief prosecutor and his boss. It's a little different from these movies where you see the police have been bribed. Well, now the criminals have gone one step further. They've actually gotten themselves elected to be the police chief. So guess what? Guess who ain't going to jail? Guess who ain't going to get prosecuted? And worse, guess who's not going to practice good, safe business practices and financial investment? That's right. There's no incentive to. They can gamble like drunken sailors. No offense, drunken sailors. They can gamble like drunken sailors with money, and then we have to go bail them out. Essentially, if they win, they win. And if they lose, we lose. That is, you and I lose, not them. It's a win-win for them. They have their own people working with these regulators. Further, the chief prosecutor and his boss, i.e. our president, and one before him, and as far back as I can remember, are essentially the personal property of these Wall Street bankers. Go to opensecrets.org and you'll see just how much it costs to buy a president. It's a pretty good investment when you consider what you get for the money you spend. ROI, it's business, acronym called return on investment. And you put a few $1 million into the coffer and you get back billions of dollars worth of advantages. It's a great investment. If I had a few $1 million, I'd go buy me one too. But I digress. Boy, what would we do if we did that? What would we do if we had somebody? Man, first thing I'd do if I got my own president, tell him to overturn about 90% of the nonsense that's coming out under the color of law by executive order, and then let Congress fight over that for the next 4 years instead of coming up with new ways to strip us of our rights. I'd also go into these states that had mandated gun control and explain to them how the Constitution works, cut off their funds, but I digress. Okay, so my focus and belief is that we are headed for an economic disaster at some point, and that is why this channel is focused on preparedness and will remain so. It becomes important to me the more I see. I want the good guys to win, and I predict that we will. We're going to fight smarter, not harder, and we're going to win. Thanks for tuning in, and long live the Republic.